Good morning, friends of freedom. Let's read some news together. So here we have an article out of the Oregonian called Water Giveaway Threatens Livelihoods, Wildlife. Oregon is helping farmers drain the state's underground resources to grow cash crops in the desert, throwing sensitive ecosystems out of balance and fueling an agricultural boom that cannot be sustained, the Oregonian/Oregon Live has found. All right, so let's start right there. To grow cash crops in the desert. I don't know if the Oregonian understands where food comes from, for one. And also, I don't think they really have a firm grasp on what it is that ranchers and farmers do. Someone who is in that business really doesn't have any intentions on pumping the ground completely dry. And they usually understand fairly well how the ecosystems work because that's required to keep their land producing. Anyway, let's continue. Managers with the Oregon Water Resources Department have handed out rights to pump water while pleading ignorance about how much was actually available. They have approved new pumping for irrigation even as their own scientists warned it could hurt the water table. Interviews and state records show. The amount of water Oregon farmers can legally extract now totals nearly 1 trillion gallons a year, enough to fill 150 million tanker trucks. So let's go ahead and get that imagery going of, oh my God, that's a lot of water. At this point, I'm starting to wonder if this is just an article to try and get us to sell that water to Nestle instead. But that's probably for another video, unless they're mentioned later on. Haven't made it yet. Let's see, where were we? More than 5,000 farms in Oregon's $5.4 billion agricultural industry rely on well water to survive. Nearly 1 million Oregonians need wells for water they drink. The unending churn of water comes with consequences. Overpumping Oregon's underground reserves, known as aquifers, can dry up household wells and saddle farmers with huge costs to pump from even greater depths. It also jeopardizes 652 species of sensitive plants and animals. Victims include federally protected salmon and steelhead, whose recovery has failed to materialize despite a 25-year effort that's cost taxpayer billions. Well, you know, we could probably get into the failed policies of the Fish and Wildlife and the failed conservation efforts, and also, do you smell some fear in there? Like, overpumping Oregon's underground reserves, known as aquifers, can dry up household wells. So these farmers are taking all of your water, and you're not going to have any. Okay, the Oregon Live reviewed hundreds of documents, interviewed dozens of farmers, ranchers, and water experts, and analyzed 3 databases covering thousands of water rights and wells. Among the findings, farmers in a quarter of eastern Oregon, the driest part of the state, are allowed to pump more underground water each year than rains and snows deposit. Now, we could get into chemtrails if you want to, or weather warfare, but let's try and stay on topic this time. It's one rough indicator of the mismatch between supply and demand. The shortfall was 49 billion gallons a year in the Willow Creek Basin of Morrow County. In southeastern Oregon's Harney Valley, it was 11 billion gallons. Bear in mind that there's rivers over there that are completely closed to getting any kind of water out whatsoever. And there's also Native American tribes over there that are trying to get rights to pump water. But you're not allowed to because of the fish. So it's this never-ending cycle of where we used to have an ecosystem, but now we can't touch any of it. We can't work with it anymore, as our ancestors have for, well, 2,000 years at least. Anyway, it's virtually impossible for the state to enforce its pumping limits. On all but a fraction of Oregon's roughly 400,000 wells, owners have no obligation to disclose their actual water consumption. They are on an honor system not to exceed their allowance. Lawmakers routinely budget no money at all for studies to expand Oregon's spotty knowledge of groundwater supplies. At current funding levels, the work won't finish until 2096. Looks like we got some time. Oregon Water Resources officials defend their decisions, saying all western states face challenges managing water. The regulators note that federal geologists completed the only statewide study of Oregon aquifers decades ago. They say it's hard to accurately keep tabs on the underground water supply without more money for staffing and research. Okay, so we went from fear to now we're begging for more tax dollars. We're obligated to evaluate the applications. We're obligated to make a decision timely, and then we have to defend that decision as well, said Doug Woodcock, Deputy Director of the Oregon Water Resources Board. And I think it would be difficult to close down all permit issuance in the state of Oregon until we had all of the information available for everywhere. Giving away water with abandon has failed Oregonians repeatedly. In river basin after river basin, officials over the decades took no action until aquifers had dwindled measurably. Regulators put on the brakes, and farmers, many of whom had bet on water rights for their livelihoods, lost out. Let's do this one again. Giving away water with abandon has failed Oregonians repeatedly. It's also failed the Oregonian in their quest for whatever. In river basin after river basin, officials over the decades took no action until aquifers had dwindled measurably. Regulators put on the brakes, and farmers, many of whom had bet on water rights for their livelihoods, lost out. So that right there, we're going to go ahead and try and get some more regulation. Let's do that. That seems to be working. But in the Umatilla Basin during the last 1980s and early 1990s, dozens of farmers lost access to their promised water under state orders. Farm values tanked. This is why we get property over in Eastern Oregon that isn't worth anything. You can get 20 acres, you know, like for $10,000. It's dry, but it's dry on purpose. They're kind of pushing us somewhere. That's another video. I'm going off on a tangent. I don't want to get into Agenda 21 stuff. We're trying to talk about water right now. With one signature, how would you like to have $400,000 wiped off your net worth? Said Bill Doherty, a Morrow County farmer who sued the state over restrictions that took half his water supply and left him with $250,000 in debt on an unused well. So this goes on and 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 on. I really would like to suggest, if anyone is actually interested in water rights or what happens to our water in Oregon and where it goes, to, for one, look up the Nestle deal right now. Nestle is trying to build a water bottling plant here in Oregon, and I mean, maybe it's circumstantial or coincidental or whatever you want to call it that we're putting out pieces like this about how farmers are using up all the water. You know what I mean? Maybe it's just a coincidence. I don't know. Maybe we need to get that Nestle plant in there and stop this farming because we're going to run out of water and we need bottled water. Maybe that doesn't have anything to do with it. Maybe the water really is drying up and I'm completely wrong. You know, 99% of the time, I don't know what I'm talking about. But I could be right. You never know. Stay safe out there, dudes.